Hi, welcome to Life of Legacy, your key to a better life. I'm your host, Jonathan Lawrence Clark, and today we've got a really special guest. Dr. Samantha Denson is a certified corporate wellness specialist and master certified health education specialist. She's a seasoned health promotion expert who helps create innovative wellness programs and helps people reach their full potential. She she works with diverse communities and organizations on creating effective health initiatives. She's a wife to an amazing husband, Robert, dog, dog mom to Heidi, and in her spare time loves reading, hiking, and baking, which means we could be great friends because I love baked goods, Sam. So I'll have to test out some of your skills at one point and see what you can do. What's your specialty like? What do you like to bake the most?
My specialty is sweet potato pie.
Ah, oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay. We'll talk. I'll see if I can see maybe I can get Robert to share some of that pie.
Good luck.
Thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate you joining and being a guest with me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love to talk. I love to talk about health and wellness. So, like, this is perfect.
Perfect. Perfect. You might as well talk to me, right?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think this is a really important topic. As you know, I'm a, life and career coach, and one of the things that frequently comes up in coaching someone is talking about their health and wellness in addition to all their other goals, because if you're not healthy, there's really not much else you can do, right? It limits your ability to excel professionally, personally, to parent and be there for your kids, or be there for your spouse, or just live a full, vibrant life, right? And then it affects longevity of your life, how long you're going to be here, right? How long can you work in terms of working years as you prepare for retirement? All those things are impacted by your health and wellness. So, I mean, it doesn't do you a lot of good to be successful professionally, earn a lot of money, and then not be able to enjoy what you've been able to generate. So, I wanted to talk to you today about a lot of the things that have been plaguing people from a health and wellness standpoint and what holds people back from taking care of themselves. So, that being said, I'd like to start out just talking about self-care in general. All right.
Okay.
So this is going to sound like a weird or maybe a funny question. Do you think people are generally bad at self-care?
So, it's a good question. I want to say something about what you said earlier. So, when you were talking about like health and how it impacts your overall well being, there's this saying like an unhealthy man has one wish, a healthy man has a thousand wishes, or something to that extent. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. When we're talking about self care, I think that's at the core of whether or not you're healthy or unhealthy, or if you're good at self care or bad at self care. And I can't purport to know like whether a person is good or bad or indifferent. I think when it comes to self care, we are what we choose to be. We can choose to be informed by what we believe about self care. And I think depending on what we think about self care determines whether or not we're good at it. If we think that self care is selfish, we might tend to prioritize others and others' needs over ourselves and neglect our own self care. Or we might say, like, if you think I don't have a lot of time to focus on self care, then you become overwhelmed with work, with family, other responsibilities. You're leaving little time for yourself. And so self care gets on the back burner. So I think the question of are people good, generally good or bad at self care, really boils down to how they perceive their life and aspects of self care. So, based on their perception, determines whether they're good at it or not. And even if you have the most positive perception about investing in yourself, there are still things that could potentially get in your way. So, I think it's not like a direct answer, but I feel like people are what they choose to be when it comes to self care.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if I just step back and listen to just kind of process everything you just said,
Mhm.
you said how they perceive self-care, but it sounds like a prioritization thing. So,
Yeah.
so are you essentially saying that people don't prioritize self-care enough and that's what gets in the way?
Yeah. I think it can be really easy to not prioritize self care and then to I think it's a mixture. Like, are you prioritizing self-care, and then how do you look at self-care? If you see it as something that's like a selfish act to invest in yourself, then you're not going to be inclined to want to do it. So I think it's like a combination of the two.
For example, I'm somebody that looks after others probably a lot more than I look out for myself.
Hmm.
And if you're somebody who is more of a caretaker of others, then sometimes you put yourself on the back burner, right?
Hmm.
And then for that person, it can seem selfish to take the time because you feel like you're taking time away from the people you care about to do something for yourself. And some people feel guilty about that, right?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
so I know that that is a dynamic for some people. Um, Maybe if you're having some health challenges and it seems daunting, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're looking at the ground you have to cover to get to where you need to be, and it's a big gap, and you're like, uh, how do I even start, right?
Yeah.
How do I even start, begin to make progress, or this is going to take forever?
Hmm.
Um, and two, like, what do you think about the whole gym thing? Some people just don't like gyms, and they think that's the only way. When they think about getting fit, the first thing they think about is going to a gym, and
Yeah.
that's not some people's jam, right? Some people's jam. So, what do you think about? Is that part of what discourages people? Do you think as well?
Yeah, I think that sometimes when we think about self-care, it becomes like this to-do list, right? I got to do all these things in order to be able to say, like, I'm prioritizing my self-care. And then going to the gym becomes one of those things that seems to be a component of self-care. And for everyone is different. I absolutely love going to the gym, but there was also a time in all of our lives where that wasn't accessible to us, and we had to come up with another way of taking care of ourselves. I will say that I was recently talking to a PA about like my own health and well-being, and she asked me a question. She said, "How long do you want to be moving your body? Like, do you want to be in your 80s, 90s? Maybe I'm a centennial, still being able to walk?" And my answer was yes. And she was like, "Well, you're gonna have to change some things." So going to the gym and going hard all the time, that's probably not sustainable for most people. Just getting outside and going for a walk, sitting down on the floor in your living room or wherever, and just getting some type of movement in. It doesn't have to be like this idealistic version of what we see self-care being portrayed as, probably on social media or on television shows. Like, it can be truly whatever you want it to be. So yeah, to answer that question, it doesn't have to be, you know, that picture of, oh, I'm going to the gym and I'm doing this and I'm waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be whatever you want it to be, what works for you, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that's sustainable, what works for you.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
so you just touched on something that I wanted to get into, which was you mentioned images on social media and on television and how that affects people's perceptions of self-care, health and fitness, and what it means to get in shape, right?
Mhm.
So, can we talk more about how that plays into this in terms of people's thoughts about, first of all, what their goals are, right?
Mhm.
Or do some people set unrealistic targets based on what they see portrayed on social media and advertising? And you can be fit without having the ripped body and the six pack and the
Yeah.
and all the things that they, and then for women, they always show these, I guess, fashion model looking people or people that are like really buff running and doing all these other things. What are our vision about what self-care looks like? How is that affected by what people see in social media and advertising?
So I'm gonna answer this in like a more circuitous way, but I'm gonna get back to the question, I promise.
Okay.
So, like, when we're thinking about health, we think about social determinants of health. And so that looks at the things that are within your control, the things that are outside of your control that impact your health and well-being. And so when we're looking at environment and community and social context, I would say like social media kind of fits under some of those umbrellas. And so when we're looking at social media, it can be easy to look at it and say, like, this is an inherently bad or negative thing. It can be used to, negatively impact your self perception, to increase body image issues in both, men and women. It can be used to set like unrealistic beauty standards that people try to aspire to. This comparison. It can be used to destabilize countries. Like social media can be used in so many negative ways, but they can also be used in so many positive ways. I feel like we curate, even though we don't know it, our social media feed. We're literally telling this algorithm what's of interest to us, and it's going to keep feeding us those things and giving us those polarized views unless we intentionally make an effort to see something outside of what we want to choose to believe is true, that confirmation bias. So when we're looking at social media and we're looking at what all these other people who we, chosen, or who the algorithm has chosen for us to consume, we can have really one-sided perceptions about what it means to be healthy. And then what happens? Well, one, we're comparing ourselves to something that's probably not even realistic, and we're feeling negative about ourselves in return. And then we're trying to live up to this unrealistic standard. And then when we fail, we're harsh on ourselves. It
Yeah.
discourages us. We don't want to do the things that we probably could be doing in a more sustainable way to enhance our overall health and well-being. And a lot of times when we're consuming things on social media, it's not necessarily realistic or attainable or sustainable. And so I think, like, going back to your question about like that impact of like social media on our physical health, I think that depending on how you engage with social media, it can be a positive or it can be a negative thing.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think, from a coaching standpoint, one of the first things we talk about, like if I'm coaching somebody, is what is your vision? Like, what are you aiming for? Right. And so with fitness, it can be good to have a vision and a target as well. Right. But sometimes that vision and target, like you said, can be, I don't want to say unrealistic, but maybe misplaced in terms of what really matters. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not to say that striving to have a great physique, visually, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's the priority and it causes you to make unhealthy choices, then that's another issue. And also I think that as a goal in and of itself and maybe alone may cause people to rush to the target because you want to get to the outcome when it's really like a lifestyle change that happens over time, and it's a journey, right? And then the rewards that you benefit from are the change in how you are able to function day to day, the things you're able to do with your loved ones, those kind of things that really matter and have depth to it. So I think maybe those more superficial targets, they can be a spark to get started and be part of the goal. But do you think it's okay for that to be the only objective?
Oh, what happens when we're solely married to the goal, the outcome? Like, I feel like that's a very dangerous thing, because it is that a strong enough why just to get to that end goal? I think a lot of times when we say, like, when we're talking about physical health in this instance, we're talking about what we aspire to be. You might have this image in your mind or this ideal. And I think, like you're saying, like that could be a great place to get started, but that's not where you want to end it, right? You got to have something more than just like this outcome. And I think what a lot of people think they want is that goal. But I think what's more important is that journey of getting to that goal. Um, if we're only married to the outcome, we miss all the things that happen in the process. And we're not as aware of what we're doing in the process that gets us there. And so I want to say this, like, I can talk about like myself as an example. If there was a point where I weighed like 176 pounds, and I was like, okay, I'm carrying at least 25 to 30 pounds of unhealthy weight here. Like, I want to get back to this. I think you and I talked about something like this a few years ago.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So like my goal was to get back to like that Samantha from like her early 20s. And I'm trying to work in reverse to get back to some place. I'm not being forward focused in that instance, and I'm holding myself to some old standard that I once just happened to meet. But let's be honest, when I was that ideal weight, I was the most unhealthiest that I'd ever been in my life. I was not healthy by any means, but for some reason I'm trying to get back to that place. And it did not serve me well. I like to look forward and reverse engineer. The how of getting there happens by actually doing it. And the doing is actually what I'm more interested in, that feeling. Like if I get to this goal, I think that I'm going to feel great about myself. And I think that I'm going to look good, or whatever it is that we think is going to happen in that end goal. What I like to do, so like I follow Tanya Lee. She's like the master life coach of the School of Self-Image. And so one of the things that she does is she talks about basically reverse engineering what you want and being in love with the process of getting there. Because the reality is happiness doesn't lie at that finish line. You can give yourself that feeling of happiness and self-confidence and self-love right now. That's going to get you to where you want to be. That self-loathing and all of those negative emotions, the I'm going to be hard on myself to reach this goal, or the negative self-talk, like whenever you fail or something. And I use the word fail loosely, but like, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm eating, some vanilla bean talenti gelato, and I'm going to eat this whole pint. Like, I'm not going to be hard on myself in that moment. I'm going to figure out, why am I doing this? Be resilient to get back to that healthy place. So it's about creating a happy journey to get to where you want to be. So if you're solely focused on the goal and you think that happiness lies in the end, sometimes you might be in for a rude awakening. Like, you get there and you realize this isn't all what I thought it would be. And you've missed out on that journey and everything that you learned in the process of getting there, those healthy behaviors that you begin to practice to build your self-confidence. So yeah, I think that focusing on just the goal is a disservice to ourselves and our journeys in life.
So, Sam, it sounds like you're saying that body that we're aiming for at the end, that's gonna get us married or get us, likes on Instagram.
That body in the end is going to solve all of our problems, right?
Right. It's gonna turn heads when we walk by, right? That thing that we're aiming for might not fill the void we're trying to fill. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and I mean, if we really are honest with ourselves, is that really what we're aiming for? The likes?
Some people are.
But I think that there's something beneath the surface there.
Okay.
It's acceptance. You want people to accept you, to like you, to love you. And you feel like I have to do X, Y, and Z in order to get that thing.
There you go.
I feel like that is like a proxy for what's actually going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. 100%. So what I'm hearing you say also is, about embracing the journey, is that a lot of this is about what we will be forced to face and deal with on the way to the target. Right. And it sounds like we're going to probably have to battle a lot of demons and things like that, inner thoughts, on the way to it, as we work to change our habits, to look out for ourselves and love ourselves more. Right. And
yeah.
And can you love yourself, like the out of shape you, the unfit you? Can you love yourself as you are and still have the drive to push to change you? Like, what is the balance between recognizing that you need to improve, but not to the point where it's like a self-loathing thing?
I would encourage everybody to love themselves in their current state as they're working towards whatever it is that they aspire to be. You can't hate your way to an outcome and assume it's going to be a happy journey. There's no happiness in that. I think sometimes we have a hard time dealing with like things that are oxymoronic. Like, how can I love myself and say that I love myself when I know that I'm unhealthy? Easy. You make a choice to say, I'm going to love myself in this moment, regardless of how bad I feel about myself, because two things can be true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel bad and feel like, oh, I want to get to this better place, but you can also love yourself at the same time. You can also choose not to feel bad about yourself in that moment, because I mean, what good comes from being harsh and negative to ourselves? You can't hate or self-loathe your way to a happy ending. It doesn't work. So like, I would encourage everybody, regardless of what it is that you're dealing with, whether it's physical health or something else, like, this is the journey that you're on. Why not love yourself in the process? I think that's a beautiful thing, to be able to love yourself and still see yourself as a work in progress. Because the truth is, we all are works in progress in one way or another. So why not show yourself an abundance of love in the process? Because like life can be really hard. Life already has its own challenges in store for you. Why become your own obstacle to overcome? And when I say that, I'm talking about like that negative self-talk and those negative thoughts about yourself. Like why create that obstacle for yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, that's so true. So we're gonna get into the mental health aspect a little bit later as well.
Mhm.
And I always call you Sam, and
You're good.
instead of Samantha. I think I'm so used to going by that. I always call you Sam. But we're gonna get
I
into.
go by both. You're
Okay,
good.
okay. We're gonna get into the mental health aspect a little bit later. So please hang on to that thought so we
Okay.
can circle back to that. But as we finish kind of our general conversation about self-care, I'd like to know from you, do you think there's enough focus on preventing disease as opposed to just treating disease?
So that's a good one. I think it's really easy to like oversimplify what truly is a complex issue by saying like, no, there's not enough focus on prevention. Like it's not profitable. Pharmaceutical companies are lucrative because like there's a heavy focus on treatment versus prevention. And while that is a valid argument, like in part, I don't think that, I feel like the reality of it is a lot more complex. I mean, the truth is, like modern medicine, it saves lives, it enhances your quality of life, it increases your lifespan, but it can also do harm because pills don't necessarily make skills. Pills are helpful, don't get me wrong. There are some things that, you can't skill your way to. You're going to need that medication to help and support you in the process. But at the same time, when we're talking about prevention, I'm looking at like lifestyle diseases, chronic diseases. There's a reason why they're called lifestyle diseases, and that's because like when you're talking about prevention, you're talking about changing behaviors. And that's not an easy thing to do. I think about my mom, like before she passed, she had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, she had type 2 diabetes, and like she's in her 50s. You're literally trying to undo, 30 plus, 40 plus years of learned behaviors. And so, like, preventing disease, I don't think that it's because there's not enough focus on it. I think that sometimes people don't have access to the resources that they need to be able to focus on it. Because if you think about it, like a doctor can only help you so much. They're not going to be there with you at the grocery store to hold your hand. And you're not going to have a physical therapist with you in your home to tell you when it's time to get up and walk and to move. And you're not going to have that coach there to help you to say, okay, these are the lifestyle changes that you need to make to get to where you want to be, to help you to figure out, like, what things do I need to do to change? Like, there's a lot of things that go into prevention. Even outside of that, going back to social determinants of health, there are so many things like outside of our control that impact our health and well-being. If you're talking about like access to healthy food options, there's food deserts everywhere. If you're talking about having the ability to have like the income that you need to be able to afford the healthcare that you need, to be able to afford the proper nutrition that you need, access to healthcare, like there's so many things to consider when we're talking about prevention. And I think that that's why it can be easy to say like, oh, there's not enough focus on prevention. I think like the public health sector exists for a reason. Like we're all focusing on, population health management. And there's so many things that are being done, but it's just like prevention it can be complex. And so I think that that's why it seems as though like treatment is prioritized over prevention at times, but I think that's just because it is a complicated thing to try to navigate and solve for.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think you made it pretty obvious in terms of in your explanation there that it can be a little more difficult than people would just making this statement that there's not enough focus on prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it understates, I think, the challenge with that. And I like that you highlighted some of the things that are outside of a person's control with
Mm-hmm.
regards to access to healthcare, healthy food, gyms, not just gym, but just fitness, resources and things like that. And I think we've got some progress to make in terms of that access, right? Which is
Yeah.
not necessarily in the individual's control, but there are things we can do to improve in that area and make
Mhm.
sure things are more accessible to people. But if you're
Yeah.
the person who's listening, who needs to improve your health, and you can't really influence those things directly right now, right? Um, what is your thought process with taking on habits to be a more preventative for disease and be more proactive? Where should you start if you're that person who's looking to make a change and you want to be better?
I think for everybody's situation, it's going to be different. I think when we're looking at like the core of a lot of these chronic diseases or looking at things that are preventable, we talk about lifestyle habits. It's simple. Like, I say it's simple. That's like an understatement. So like eat healthy, move your body and exercise, meditate, get enough sleep, reduce your screen time. Like there's a long list of things that people can do to improve like their health. Um, but for every person, it's going to be different. Like if I'm the type of person that gets 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, I don't need you to tell me to get enough sleep. Like what else can I do, right?
Hmm.
I think it's about doing the best that you can with what you have. Let's say you don't live in a walkable community or you don't live in a safe community where you can go outside and go for a walk, walking around your house. Like I would literally go downstairs and walk circles in my kitchen if I need to get my steps in for the day. When it comes to going to like the grocery store, simple things. If you're staying on the outskirts of the grocery store, I'm not going to talk about the meat section. I'm going to leave that alone. But like if you're looking at produce and things like that, like all of your processed foods that are going to be in those center aisles. If you're walking around the perimeter of a grocery store, like that's where you're more likely to be getting those healthier foods. And I say healthier. So just being like, if you're walking around the grocery store, how much time are you spending in the aisles versus on the perimeter? I see I'm not going to get into meat. Like I'm a vegan, like 90% of the time I still eat meat, but like, there are certain things that we know serve our body well and things that don't serve our body well. And I feel like Michael Pollan, I think that's his name, he said it best. Like there's no such thing as absolutism. It's about doing what works best for you. For some people, they can have meat in their diet and be perfectly fine if they do it in moderation. I think that's key. They can have dairy in their diet and be fine. But again, moderation is key. Like when we're talking about nutrition and what we're consuming, you are what you absorb. And so being mindful of what is it that I'm consuming. And it's not just what am I putting into my mouth, but like what am I putting into my mind as well. So what are you consuming on social media? Like going back to like that screen time and all of those types of things. Like there's an abundance of different things that people can do to be healthy. But I think at the core of it, I would say being self-aware, listening to your body. It's going to tell you what you need. It's going to tell you, I'm stressed right now. I'm grinding my teeth and my brain's about to explode. Being aware is step one. And okay, well, maybe it's time for me to step away from whatever it is that I'm doing and take like 3 deep belly breaths. Or maybe you sat down and you ate something and you're feeling really yucky afterwards. Like your body's going to tell you, like, okay, this doesn't feel really good to me. So if you're aware of that, you can say, okay, well, maybe I should be eating something different. Like I think being self-aware is key. And then also, I've talked about self-talk before, like managing that self-talk. If you set goals for yourself, you think you want to do something and you don't necessarily measure up to it, like, okay, be resilient. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to miss the mark at times. What conversations are you having with yourself when that happens? Have powerful conversations with yourself so that you can easily redirect and start to re-engage in the things that do serve you well. So, like, there's a long list of things that people can do, but I think it starts with being self aware, having powerful conversations with yourself, and then engaging in those actual behaviors that do serve you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for simplifying that at the end because when I heard you say there was a long list of things people can do, and I put myself in the seat of that person who's trying to make a change,
Hmm.
I get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
And so you get overwhelmed. And so what happens? You don't do anything
exactly.
because it seems like too much. It seems too daunting. So I liked that at the end there, you simplified it and
Yeah.
went high level and just said, okay, let's start here. Right.
Hmm.
So those were the starts. I heard
Hmm.
the, are there any stops? Are there any things that people high level could stop doing? Top of your head.
I'm okay. There's a few things that come to mind for me. Like, I'll talk about this a lot. This kind of goes into our mental health conversation, but like, what conversations are you having with yourself? Like, I think sometimes we can be our biggest self critics. And the things that we choose to believe about ourselves, about others, about the world around us informs what we do. And I think that we should stop. You're not going to be able to stop it altogether. Like, that's not realistic. But, like, taking the reins on that negative self talk. And it, like I said, it goes back to being self aware. Like, decrease and challenge the negative self talk. So, like, stop negatively talking to yourself. And having more powerful conversations with yourself about whatever it is that you're navigating. I think that's the core of all health behavior changes, your
Okay.
thoughts and your beliefs about what it is that you need to do. Like, if I believe that I need to, okay, for me, like, mindfulness meditation has always been like that little, hump I'm trying to overcome in terms of like being better at my mental health. So like I tell myself I'm too busy to meditate during the day. I'm too busy to, do anything regarding like deep belly breaths and de-stressing. And if I tell myself I don't have time, if I tell myself it's too hard, if I tell myself it's going to take too long, or if I tell myself that I should reward myself with this, and because I haven't been productive enough, I can't get to this thing that's so great for my mental health, that meditation and mindfulness, then that talking that I'm having with myself, oh, I haven't been productive enough today, like I can't do this. Like, the thoughts that I'm having about engaging in that health behavior is either going to help me or it's going to hinder me from doing what I need to do. So like, stop the negative self-talk. Um, and then another thing is like to stop holding on to things that don't serve you well. It can be
Ooh,
people, spoken words not spoken, material things. It can be your ideals. It can be what you're consuming on social media. Like, stop holding on to things that don't serve you well.
that's a big one.
Yeah. So, and I think that's one of my favorite ones, because it's like, if you let go of the things that don't serve you well, and it's oversimplified because sometimes letting go is hard. Like, what if the thing you need to let go of is like a person? It's going to be very different than letting go of that thing,
Yeah.
Like, I can easily go to the grocery store and choose not to buy the ice cream or whatever. And I'm saying
Yeah.
ice cream because I love ice cream so much. But it might be hard to let go of the person that says things that may not serve me well in my journey, that may not be helpful.
Yeah.
So it's about like not holding on to things that don't serve you well, and then looking at how you're processing those experiences. How are you internalizing it? What are you making it mean to you? Um, and how can you reframe your thinking about it in a way that makes you feel better? I'm reading a book. It's called Your Brain's Not Broken, and she talks about boundaries. And there's your house, and there's the yard, and then there's the world outside of your fence. And at each level, you get to choose who is in those spaces and what access they have to you. And so, like, I'm really big on boundaries, healthy boundaries. So, like, if I'm engaging with someone or if I'm in a certain environment and it doesn't serve me well, I'm really conscientious of what can I do to either remove myself from the situation, or what can I do to limit the negative impact of whatever it is that I'm experiencing, so that I can feel whole and happy and complete at the end of this experience, like whatever it is. So I would say, like, stop holding on to things that don't serve you well. Whatever failures happened in the past, whatever negative things someone said to you in the past or in the present, like, let it go, because holding on to it's almost like you're blocking your own blessings for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take what you just shared.
Hmm.
Let's talk about practices,
Hmm.
because I'm hearing you, reduce your negative self-talk, right? Let go of things that aren't serving you. You know,
Hmm.
I'm hearing you go through these things that make a lot of sense. But when I'm thinking about implementation, I might
Hmm.
not know where to start to go about doing those things, right? Are
Yeah.
there any practices, and I might have a couple of ideas as well that I would add if you don't cover them. Are there
Yeah.
any practices that you would think a person can start that would help them improve their positive self-talk, reduce their negative self-talk, start to be more self-aware? What do you mentioned meditation could be a practice, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. And then what practices can you put in place to make sure that you prioritize the positive practices? Because you talked about not having time to meditate, right? So what are the practices that you put in place to make sure that you're doing the things that help you turn it around as well? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, like, I have ADHD. I'm super forgetful. And I mean, some people who are listening to this right now probably kind of realize it because the way I talk is like a really roundabout way. So like I can be very forgetful, but I can also like super like hyper focus on something. And like I'm sitting at my desk working and it's 5 hours later and I haven't gotten up to eat, to use the bathroom, to take a break, nothing. Like I'm just solely focused on this one thing. So what I like to do, I always have my phone with me. I set 2 alarms on my phone. It snaps me out of whatever it is that I'm doing, and it reminds me it's 12 o'clock. Breathe and stretch. Like it, I make the alarm say that to me. It's time to breathe and stretch, and I do the same thing again at 4. And I have another alarm at 5 that tells me it's time to walk away from a great day at work. And so when I'm getting these cues, it helps me to remember, like, okay, I've done something and I've been doing this for a while. Like it's time for me to pull myself away from this and to focus on myself, on me. I don't care if I've accomplished what I sat down to accomplish or not. Like put something, a visual cue or something to prompt you to do what you feel like you need to do for yourself. And so for me, it's that meditation. So that alarm helps to snap me out of it and to do what needs to be done. Um, I like to leave notes for myself around the house, like little things that remind me of like how to engage in positive self-talk. So like Intelligent Change has these daily or weekly I call them affirmations. I think that's what they're called. Yeah, weekly affirmations. I have one in my bathroom. So every single morning when I, go in there to brush my teeth, there's this reminder there that tells me something positive to keep in mind for that week. But it's not just about that singular message on that card. It's a reminder to me to focus on how am I talking to myself throughout the day. I think when we're talking about practical implications, it starts with self-awareness. And I'll, talk about that ad nauseum, but like it's really about being self-aware. And from there, you can make the changes that you want to make. Because first you got to figure out what it is that you need. And if you're not listening to your body, you'll never figure that out. I feel like as we get older, like at some point in time in our lives, we're very aware. You
Yeah.
know, our body talked to us and we knew what it was telling us. We would cry if we were hungry or needed our diaper change or something. But somewhere along the line, we stop listening to our body. We become really good at ignoring it and pushing through. That pushing through mentality can be so dangerous to like our overall health. Um, and so we start ignoring those cues that our bodies are giving us. And I think if you're trying to figure out, well, where do I start? I think it starts with being self-aware and then one thing at a time. Like
Yeah.
the world wasn't built in a day. So there's what you can do, and then there's what you can do in a day.
Yeah.
So just figuring out like one thing at a time, focusing on it, getting good at it, and then slowly but steadily adding things to the list. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. Because I like the alerts, having
Mm-hmm.
alerts that remind you, right? Which is also in line with that is scheduling it. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure you put it on a calendar, put it in an alert, and
Yeah.
and also stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Once you schedule it, stick to it and honor it, make it a priority. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
now
And
life,
you're not gonna be perfect either. Like there are
yeah,
gonna be days where you don't do the thing that needs to be done. So be resilient. Talk
yeah,
positively to yourself about whatever it is that you feel like you didn't do that you should have done. And that'll set you up for success in the future when you get back at doing the thing that you wanted to do. Yeah.
yeah. And that's and matter of fact, you actually hit on another point I was going to make is if you schedule it and life gets in the way, stuff comes up sometimes, just move it, but
Mm-hmm.
don't just delete it and skip it.
Mm-hmm.
Reschedule it somewhere else and then come back to it, even if it's on a different day or whatever. But I think the habit of scheduling is key to prioritizing the things that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing everything you can to honor it, right? Don't make it a habit of moving around too much. Like if you've had to reschedule it 5 times, you might need to think, okay, I'm not really making this a priority. I'm just putting it on the calendar, right? So at a certain point, you have to start telling somebody or something no.
Yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
that's not everything, right? Because there's some stuff that has to be done, obviously, but If you're moving it that much and you're skipping over it that much, then you're not prioritizing it enough.
Yeah.
So figuring out what part of the day is the best for you to do things for yourself. If you know it's better to do it in the morning versus the
Hmm.
evening because there's always something coming up in the evening. That's me, right? Uh,
Yeah.
my wife, my kids, somebody always wants something else from me in the evening for me to do, whether it's stop by the store, it could be a whole bunch of different things, right? So
Hmm.
if I'm going to work out, it's better for me to work out first thing in the morning or like immediately after work
Hmm.
because once I get home, I can get pulled in a million different directions and then it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So I know for me, that time of day is probably better because I get up before everybody else and I
Hmm.
can get it in before anybody's awake. And I know there's no competing priorities for me early.
Yeah.
So that was one trick for me, right?
Hmm.
But I like those tips. You said the labels, the reminders, putting
Hmm.
those on the mirror or around the house for the positive self-talk. I thought
Hmm.
that was a great one too. Um, One thing I would probably add to that is journaling.
Oh my gosh, I love journaling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you talked about self-awareness, processing your thoughts and remembering those things, I think journaling is a great tool for that. Uh,
Yes.
it's a great place to work through your thoughts, sort through things, go back and revisit entries from before. I do that all the time and look at where my headspace was on something and notice if, okay, has this been a problem for like the last 6 months that I've been trying to work out in my journal entries? What am I doing about it? How can I shift my mindset? So it's just a way to process because so much goes on in our heads uh,
Hmm.
that affects our behaviors that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
It's important to put it on paper and put your goals on paper. You can do
Hmm.
that journaling too.
Yeah. I love the journaling. Like I try to journal every single day. I have like this daily 5 practice that I got from like the School of Self Image. And so one of the things that you're doing every morning is you're talking about like how are you feeling mentally and physically. So you're checking in with your body. You're talking about the things that you want to do to have an extraordinary day. And then you go into, well, what are some things that I want to let go of? What are some things that I want to add to my day? And then in the evening, you revisit that. And you're saying, well, what went well today? What can I improve upon tomorrow? And then what are the thoughts that help me towards, accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish? Like there's a whole list of things in there. But then on the weekends, sometimes I like to just sit with my thoughts and just take a little deeper dive. I remember, so I shared that I have ADHD. So like I have deep, very uncomfortable episodes of depression, and they can last for days, weeks, or months. And so I remember one time in particular where I think I've been feeling depressed for at least 3 months. I just couldn't get myself out of that rut. Like no matter how hard I tried, I was just in this very yucky, dark place. And being able to sit and to journal about what I was experiencing and to get all of that out of my head and onto paper. I'm not saying it healed me because it didn't. I still had to, navigate that period of time because I know it comes and it goes. But like just journaling helped me to feel just a little bit better. So like if I'm, on my scale of yuckiness, if I'm at a 10, if I journal, I might bring myself down to like a 7 or a 6. And those little things help. They make a world of difference. So I love journaling. Yeah.
Outstanding, outstanding. And then you also mentioned letting go of things that don't serve you was one that really registered with me too. That was a big one. Um, and I think, and you could tell me if you agree or disagree or have additional thoughts. If you also focus on the things that do serve you and
Hmm.
spend more time on those, right? Even to the point of going back to scheduling, making sure you make time, carve out time for things that serve you well, things that recharge you, things that make you feel good about yourself, things that advance you towards your goals, and you're
Hmm.
making those a priority and making time for those, you naturally spend less time on the things that don't serve you because there's no more space for it.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to have like that heavy focus. Like, we're talking about gratitude here at
Yeah.
this point. We're talking about things that serve us well. I think it's really important to practice gratitude, because it can be so easy to get lost in like the daily responsibilities. You're just going, going, going. You're on go, or maybe you're not on go and you're just complacent and you're just bored and you don't know what to do. Like, no matter what extreme you're at, being able to be grateful for the little things. Like, I woke up this morning, I'm there's air in my lungs, like I'm still here. the sun rose. I didn't have to do anything about it. Like just little things to be grateful for, whatever it is. But I also think like when we're talking about things that don't serve us well, I think it's good to be aware of it. It's good to be careful with like how we internalize those things and how we're processing and thinking about those things, because I don't want to say, oh, just be grateful, because then you're ignoring some very serious, things that may need
Yeah.
to be addressed. I think there's a healthy balance, but to ruminate on the negative, it doesn't serve you well. I feel like if you're in a place where you're stuck focusing on those things that don't serve you well, you have to do something to get yourself out of that rut, because like the brain is a powerful thing. You're you're literally digging a line deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground. I'm talking about your brain being the ground. But every time you go down that negative path, that negative self-talk, your brain it's like water. It'll take the path, the least resistance.
Yeah.
That's how it always goes. So that's how we're going to continue to go. You have to get yourself off of that negative path by being self-aware that that's where you are, and then shifting focus in a more positive way. So you can either shift your focus and choose to focus on like what you're grateful for, or you can choose to say, how can I look at this negative thing and have a more positive or more powerful conversation with myself about it?
Yeah. And they do make gratitude journals as well. I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a
Yeah.
good way to stay mindful of the things that you're appreciative for,
Mm-hmm.
and help shift that mindset too. So I found
Yeah.
that to be a useful tool for me at times in the past.
Yeah.
You also mentioned like people sometimes being things that people that don't serve you being something you could potentially need to let go, and that can be hard if it's a family member,
Yeah.
spouse, like people like that, obviously. But also on the flip side of that, when we talked about focusing on things that do serve you, are you creating enough time for people that do serve you and people that actually feed you and help
Mm-hmm.
you out, right? People that challenge you to grow, people that make you feel better about yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Carving out more time for those people naturally leaves less time for the people that don't serve you. And then
Yeah.
for the family members and the people that you can't 100% cut off, maybe you just kind of reduce your time.
Boundaries.
Boundaries,
Yeah.
boundaries. Yeah, I'm busy today. Those kind of boundaries. I've got,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like and it can be hard to do too. I mean, I can reflect on a time in my life where I had to cut off someone who was very important to me. And it was very, very hard to do. But I knew that if I didn't, that it wouldn't be healthy for me. And so my hope was that we could get to a place in the future where we will be able to kind of come back to each other and to be able to do so in a healthy way. And it can be really hard to do that, especially when you're like, for in my instance, like it was my mom. It was very hard to say, I cannot speak to you. Like there are things that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen here. And in order for me to get to that place, like this is not it, I'm still struggling to like put my words together when I think about it, because it was a very hard time for me. And I know it was a very, very hard time for her too. But there was just a lot of healing that needed to be done, a lot of therapy. And it was just best for us in that time that we gave ourselves space to go through whatever it was that we needed to go through to be able to get back to a place to where we could come together and do so in a way that was amicable and healthy. And we thankfully we got back to that place well before she passed. So like it was some time lost, but one thing about me, I'm not going to be the type of person to regret things. You do what's best for you in that time. You may realize later on in life, like, oh, I could have made better decisions. I could have done things better, but you can't judge yourself harshly for doing what was best for you at that time. And so sometimes cutting off people who mean a lot to you, and I don't want to say cutting off because it sounds so finite, but like creating distance between the people that mean the most to you so that you can get to a better place with them, even if it's just like, okay, well, I've done the work that I needed to do and they may still be the same, but I know how to better cope with some of the things that were happening, like just little things. Like, I think it makes a world of difference. So I don't want to say like, stop holding on to the people that don't serve you well and assume that that's an easy thing to do, because it's not. It's very hard.
yeah.
Um, but like creating those healthy boundaries, I think that's really important.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And you mentioned something in there, doing the work on yourself or
Hmm.
creating the distance and the space to be able to do the work on yourself so that you can approach the relationship in a healthier way. Because
Hmm.
sometimes we have things that we need to deal with that are reasons why we can't navigate that relationship the way we need to, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's toxic, but we're playing a role in it being toxic because of what we're tolerating and some of the other
Hmm.
things that we're doing, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
maybe you're contributing to it and it's just you're not good for each other, right?
Hmm.
So along those lines, mental health, right?
Yeah.
Part of that learning working on your own stuff sometimes involves seeing a mental health professional, right?
Yeah.
Something I think is positive, but some might think there's a stigma, in certain communities about going to see a mental health professional. Some
Mhm.
people think that means something's wrong with you, that you're broken, and that kind of thing. So I really would like to talk about the role of mental health as well. We've talked about the physical and some of the other things, but I don't want to skip over mental health because I think it's really important for each and every one of us. Thank you so much for watching this clip. If you'd like to see the full interview or more content from Crazy Dreams Inspired, please visit our page. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you there.